Hello and welcome back to this third podcast, The Balancing Act, a life that changed the way we work. And I'm here, I'm Simonetta Manfredi, Director of Research and Innovation at Oxford Brookes and Professor of Equality and Diversity Management, having the pleasure to continue my conversation with Joanna Foster CBE and talking about her work and work-life balance, how she shaped policies and practice and made a real difference, something that has been a constant feature of her career, making a difference and improving things for people. So we had a very long conversation over 2 podcasts, and now I think we have reached the new millennium. So what was happening? How was work-life balance evolving, Joanna, in the new millennium?
Well, awareness was really beginning to develop, and organizations, public and private, were beginning to get the message that if they wanted to employ women, they're going to have to bend and get the flexible working and the part-time and the job sharing, and increase the childcare. Of course, that's another great story.
Yeah.
Not great story.
Yeah.
So all that was beginning to go on, and they were realizing it was to their benefit as well as to women's benefit. And as women, we realized that actually, it was going to be all right. We were going to do it, and people were beginning to bend their policies somewhat to help, but only somewhat. And there was a great deal of education and training going on for women, which helped enormously. Every organization seemed to be offering training to women, and more into leadership too, around the equality and diversity and inclusion. Although DEI wasn't known then, it was known in the States. We'll come to that in a moment. The pay gap was beginning to shrink.
Yeah.
However, early events, middle of 2000s, was the 2008 pay world crisis, money crisis.
Oh, yes.
The financial crisis and austerity. And to begin with, the recession really hit men most in the construction and the heavy industries.
Yeah.
And then gradually, there became a disproportionate effect on women. There were cuts in the public sector, and all sorts of cuts in retailing and childcare and nursery places, and which were affecting women and affecting, the men being out of work were affecting the benefits, and particularly the mothers and on low incomes, and very particularly on single mothers. So it became quite fast, quite a depressing time. Meanwhile, as I've mentioned on one of the podcasts, that Harriet Harman and Tony Blair's colleagues were busy working up. She was Minister of Women's Rights then, and she played a major role in championing the Parliament and the legislation. And the Equality Act of 2010 was really important, and it consolidated all the other regulations together. And that was when the EOC was also merged into the Human Rights Commission, which somewhat watered down what it had been able to do as a single focused organization.
And of course, it was also in 2006, I remember they brought in the flexible working legislation.
That's right, yes.
Which that was also very, very important.
Incredibly important, yes.
At the beginning, I remember that it was only for parents with very young children, but then eventually has been extended to everybody, but that was quite a turning point.
Very important, yes. So in the years after austerity, the pandemic then came and hit us all, and that clearly put a damper on all the key gender and equality goals, and resulted in very negative outcomes, as we know, in many sectors, and where women were working into a lot of the frontline things. Of course, a lot of women had to go on doing nursing with the consequence we know about, but the hospitality and the service industry, where women had been particularly strong before. Lots of childcare centres closed. In fact, I think they all closed except for key workers.
Except for key workers at the time, yes.
And of course, based at home, there was all the childcare and the homeschooling and the pressure to take unpaid leave as well if your employment was still going on. And many women chose to leave work totally. Either they chose or they had to leave it. I think it was called in the research career stagnation. And the pressure made the training impossible. So there was very little training going on now, either in any of the companies or organizations, and networking stopped too.
Yes.
Although I imagine there was quite a lot of networking on the telephone, and all that impacted on the pay too, on the equal pay.
It did, and I suppose also that from work-life balance, what the women found themselves in some cases that they are. I remember some of the colleagues here. We were able to maintain, continue to teach, or we had to move everything online, but nonetheless we were able to continue to do that. But then we had colleagues who had small children and in the house, in the home, and at the same time they had to find a way of doing their work, having the children in the home, having to school them. So it was really difficult. But I would say one thing about the pandemic, the one positive things that came out of that we can work hybrid. Because you probably remember at one point when we were exploring all the different type of flexible working, working from home was quite a big thing. And I remember at the time doing some research, other colleagues looking at, and some of the issues about working from home that came over and over again especially when you were working, interviewing employers and asking their views about working from home. There was this concern that would people work if they are at home? The issue of trust.
Actually, productivity went up.
Productivity would go down. How do we check that they're actually doing what they're supposed to do? Well, now I suppose one positive thing was that actually we did experience that productivity will not go down. In fact, in some cases, perhaps can go up. And yes, people can work from home, and yes, people can continue to perform and do it well. So in that respect, and here at Brooks, for example, there's a lot of hybrid working, and I believe in other places. So at least in that respect, we established that.
I agree. But during it, women were doing what I think, again, I think it was the Boston College for Work and Family said that women got terribly stressed by doing the third shift.
Yes,
domestic duties, keeping up work responsibilities, and homeschooling. Often without very much guidance about how to do the homeschooling.
Yes, no, absolutely.
And often they were around the kitchen table and the men folk were in the spare room.
Yes.
And interestingly, in the research, a lot of men got promoted during that time because they were doing their work at home. But that didn't seem to happen to women.
No,
although women got very pressured trying to keep the quality of what they were doing up, because always been, like part-time workers, always been very keen to do as much as possible and as good as possible. But you're absolutely right. It resulted in the hybrid working. But I just want to come back to the parenting. Although men were at home and they loved being able to walk the dog and they loved being able to play with their young children, and they did the parenting, fathers got much closer to the children, but they didn't want to do the childcare when they had to do their work.
Right.
So that was an issue still. But certainly I see it all round, that young fathers are really so different from previous generations with their children. They mind just as much about flexible working. However, they don't take the leave, the paternity leave, because of the effect it might have on their careers. And if only they took it all, and if only it was shared, that would be to great advantage of both of them, but mostly to the women.
Yes. Don't you think that perhaps in this respect is better what happens in the some Nordic countries?
Oh, absolutely.
Where the paternity leave, either they take it or they lose it.
Yes, I agree entirely with
that.
The
fact that they can share here is, and always the mothers ended up taking it.
I totally agree with that. Yes, so it's not considered to be bad for their careers. No, I agree. So in terms of equality post-COVID now, there's clearly some good news, because a lot of things are established. And as you were saying, the hybrid system of working seems to be quite accepted, although begin with, it was more accepted that one could do homeworking, and I think the big companies worried about their empty buildings have encouraged people to go back. I don't know that we can foresee very much whether all those systems will go on working when the pressure, if there's another awful austerity session, what will happen then? So there's some good news, but some quite depressing news. And I'm quite depressed by what's happening in America, because so many of the things that happen in Trump culture have a nasty way of coming over. And there are a lot of American companies here who think that DEI is a good idea. And they're stopping it. So all of that we need to watch carefully, and the champions of good opportunities for women and men need to be encouraged like mad. So we must find the good men with their daughters in mind. The pay gap has been slowly shrinking. Again, we don't know what will happen, but I'd quite like just to talk briefly about AI, because the research, and I suspect that our learned audience will probably know more about this than I do, but it's quite clear from the research that the starter jobs, whether it's in law or wherever it is, can be done by AI, reading cases, doing all of this. So women are going to have to be much more mobile if they want to go to the, up the ladder and to the top, and they're going to have different sorts of skills, which, are not, I mean, of course, the emotional skills and the face-to-face skills are good, but I think we're just going to have to hope that the daughters are going to be very skilled in other technical subjects as well.
But don't you think that those challenges that, for example, AI is going to present are challenges for everybody, for women as well? Now, especially you just mentioned those early starter level jobs, then they could almost disappear because the AI can do that kind of work. That will probably be a challenge to everybody.
But women will continue, hopefully, to come out of universities on a par with men in terms of their qualifications, but slightly different sorts of qualifications. That's why the change is going to be important, of upskilling and being more mobile, which, of course, as I know from my experience, particularly when there are dual careers, it's quite complicated.
Yes, indeed. And I mean, and I suppose also it's a question, we keep, I don't know for how long we've been talking about lifelong learning, but is it really, how much do we put it into practice in reality, and how much is we just talk about it? But I think that is something that would be really important for everybody, to continue to upskill or change your skill set depending how things are going. But I would just wanted to have your views. How, I think, we've come a long way, and talking to you has been fantastic, and a real absolute privilege to hear how things have evolved and to hear all the fantastic work that you have put in. But I think we should never be complacent, because one of the things that also history shows us, I'm hearing things at the moment, and I thought I would never hear again in my lifetime, and I am. Such as the women should submit. So I'm thinking the work-life balance is rubbish.
Well, that is, of course, coming from MAGA in the States
we know where it's coming from, but unfortunately there are voices in this country who are repeating that kind of thing.
And there are one or two political voices which don't mind much about family-friendly employment and flexible
and especially
childcare.
Saying all that is nonsense, is rubbish. So what do you think, to leave our listener with a message, what would be your, given the work that you have done and the experience that you accumulated, all the different audiences you had to deal with, what would be your message? What can we do to make sure that we do not lose what we have gained?
Well, I think we need to go on underlining the family-friendly policies, the flexibilities, the part-time, the working from home, the hybrid, all of that. And we need to underline, as we were talking earlier about men taking leave as well, underline the retraining and the upskilling. That's going to be very important. And to really make sure that leaders go on understanding, and that they don't get tainted by some of what I call the Tate stuff, or some of their sons and things about the roles of men and women, and quite apart from anybody else who is diverse in any other way.
Yeah.
So keeping open minds and being creative and pushing and trying to maintain the things that we fought hard for, and actually reminding some of the generation to come how things were, which they don't believe.
Yes, and I think in that respect, this conversation with you have been great. I can imagine some of our students listening to it, knowing where they come from.
Yes.
No, it's not something that you may think you give for granted now, but how much work and how many challenges one had to overcome to get to the point where we got.
But it's so interesting, the conversation between the generations.
Yes.
Because my mother's generation did brilliant things in the war, technical, all sorts of things, then were sent back to the kitchen and, to buy all the white goods.
Yeah.
And hence my mother being rather frightened about the kind of things I was doing, although she was a tremendous entrepreneur in the community, but never for money. So, each generation is going to find its way, but I do think there is so much pressure on the young, whether it's not having anywhere decent to live, whether it's, around the stress, whether it's around their relationships because of all the work pressure, and what's going on in the world, which of course affects people dramatically, their mental health and things. But we don't want to let words like well-being and work-life balance just become words that just get used all the time. We have to try and get people to think about what it really means.
Yes.
And people say, oh, equality, but actually it's about the opportunities.
Yes.
Not about the equality.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And if I think about my career, there were moments in my career as a single mother that if I didn't have the option of flexible working, I don't know whether I would have managed to pursue my career in the way they have done. So there are those crucial moments in your life when you need some support, you need something different in order to take you to the next phase. And that is really important.
Although it's interesting thinking about now, I mean, I haven't done podcasts and I haven't thought back to those days of the early Equal Opportunities Commission life for a long time. But I'm involved in a very interesting community program trying to make money for our wonderful 800-year-old listed church. And I've got the Vice Chancellor and the Bishop coming to talk about leading change. And it's all about stories.
Yes.
And we had Philip Pullman and we had my old role model of Prue Leith, who's become a very good friend. And to get, and lots around sports. We've got one called Going for Gold, where the previous Chancellor, Dame Kathleen Granger, and her gold medals. I think, and we see in broadcasting, and particularly the foreign correspondents, there's so many brilliant women doing so many jobs. And we haven't got time to talk about where the backlash from men is. Why are the women doing all these jobs? Why aren't we appointed? Which I think there is a bit of that. But I think putting the emphasis on things that help to have a family that is really working well, and time to breathe and to walk and to enjoy the children and to look after one's parents. And wants, of course, more elder care and more childcare. There's plenty on the agenda still.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's lovely that, for instance, Brooks is clearly still completely focused on why these issues are important. And it seems 1,000,000 years ago that I opened one of the first childcare centres for Oxford University, but there are now lots of childcare centres and wonderful research going on as well.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I mean, it's been absolutely great talking to you. And indeed, and I really hope that our listener who have this opportunity to travel through the work-life balance, how it's evolved, in terms of what you just said about the future, how much work has taken to get where we are and making sure now the work is that maintain the good things and in fact improve. So thank you to our listener. This is the end of our mini podcast series on work-life balance with Joanna Foster. Just to remind everybody that we are really lucky to have the Joanna's archive at Oxford Brookes University. If this is an area that interests you, you can gain much more knowledge through the documents and all the documentation that she has left at the university. So thank you, Joanna. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope everybody who's been listening has enjoyed.
Me too.
Yeah, bye.